Hi everyone, welcome back to ladensercrotchets. If you're new to the channel, you're welcome. Kindly subscribe and join the family, and you get to enjoy a wide range of crochet tutorials from this channel, ranging from skirts to dresses to tops to shorts to bralettes. In this one, we're going to be creating this granny square set. This is my first ever granny square patchwork set, and I'm so excited. So to start with, we're going to work the skirt in this particular video. Then in the next one, I'll be showing you how to do the top. If you appreciate the tutorials, leave a special gift by clicking on the thanks button, and let's get into the tutorial. I'll start by making granny squares, a lot of them, and a few granny triangles. So I'll first show you how to make the granny square and the granny triangle, and then I'll show you how to connect them. So this is the square and this is the triangle. Let's begin with the square. For this, you're going to need yarn. I have my medium weight yarn right here. Then I'll be using a 3.5mm crochet hook. You're going to need a pair of scissors, a darning needle, and of course a measuring tape when we start connecting the pieces together. So we're going to begin with a magic ring, and to create my magic ring, I start by slip knots as usual. Then we're going to chain 4. Then we're going to do a slip stitch onto the first chain to create the ring. Into the first chain, do a slip stitch, and this is a ring right here. So then we're going to chain 2, yarn over, go into that ring right here, and place a double crochet. So you're going to yarn over and grab a loop to get 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then place another double crochet, and the chain 2 acts as our first double crochet. Then we have the 2 double crochets, and that makes 3 double crochets. Then we're going to chain 2, yarn over, go into the same ring and place 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2, go back into the same ring, place another 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 2, then go back into the same ring and place another 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. So in total you should have 4 clusters of 3 double crochets each. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we're going to chain 2 and slip stitch onto the chain 2 to complete the first round. So do a slip stitch right here, and that's our first round of the granny square. Then we're going to chain 2 to begin row 2 and turn. We're going to be turning at the end of every row as we begin the next one. So when you turn, you're going to work into the chain 2, and into the chain 2 we're going to place 2 double crochets, 1 and 2. So together with the chain 2, those are 3 double crochets. Then you're going to chain 2, go back into the chain 2 stitch that we've just worked, and place 3 more double crochets. Then we're going to skip over to the next chain 2, but then as we do that, we're going to chain 1. So chain 1 and move over to the next gap and place 3 double crochets. Then after that, you're going to chain 2, go back into the same chain 2 and place 3 more double crochets. Then chain 1, skip over to the next gap and place 3 double crochets. Chain 2, back into that same gap and place 3 double crochets, 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to move over to the last chain 2 gap, and before then we chain 1 and then skip to the gap, place 3 double crochets. chain 2, back into the same gap with 3 double crochets, and to complete the second row you're going to chain 1, then slip stitch onto the chain 2 at the beginning. Do a slip stitch, and that's our row 2 done. So we have our 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now chain 2 and turn to begin row 3. We begin into this gap and we're going to place just 2 double crochets there. And we're only going to be chaining, placing a shell in the corners. A shell is 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. So because in this gap, that's not a corner, we're only placing 3 double crochets. So now we're going to chain 1 and then go into this corner and place a shell, that is 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets into the same spot. Then chain 1 into this chain 1 gap right here, we place only 3 double crochets, chain 1, go into the corner and place a shell, so that's 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 more double crochets into the same chain 2 gap, that's going to take us to the gap that is a chain 1 gap. So chain 1 and then we work 3 double crochets there, chain 1, go into the corner with a cluster, that is a shell, chain 2, then 3 more double crochets, chain 1 and work into the chain 1 gap with just 3 double crochets, chain 1, work a shell into the corner, at the end chain 1 and slip stitch onto the chain 2. That's row 3 done. We're going to do the final row, which is our row 4. Chain 1, turn into that gap, place 2 double crochets to make 3 double crochets, chain 1, skip to the corner and place a shell there, that's 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 more double crochets, chain 1 into this gap, 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets into this chain 1 gap, chain 1, that gets us to the corner and we place the shell there, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 more double crochets. Now we repeat this to the end, so these 2 gaps will get each 3 double crochets, the corner will get the shell, these get 3 double crochets each, and this gets the shell, then 3 double crochets in this one, and continue to the end. At the end, we chain 1 and slip stitch onto the chain 2. Chain 1 and cut off the yarn. Pull through and fasten. And we're done with our first granny square. I like to stretch it out a little bit, like that, because I do not have a blocking board. And there we have our square. Now get the darning needle and weave in the ends, beginning with this one. So this is how I go about weaving in the ends on the granny squares. Then I'll cut off whatever will remain. And there we have our square ready. Next we do the granny triangle. For the squares I did a total of 30, but I'm not sure if they're going to be enough. If they're not enough, I'll do more. To work the triangle, we start with a slip knot, then chain 4 to create the magic ring. So chain 1, 2, 3 and 4, then slip stitch into the first chain, create that gap where we're going to work our double crochets, chain 2, and that's going to be our first double crochet. Then we're going to go into this gap with 2 double crochets. So yarn over, insert your hook into the ring, yarn over, grab a loop to get 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the remaining 2, then place another double crochet to make 3. Then we're going to chain 2, go back into the same ring with 3 double crochets, chain 2, go back into the same ring with another 3 double crochets, and we're going to do a total of 6 clusters of 3 double crochets each. So these are 3. I'm going to make 3 more separated by the chain 2. So chain 2, I've just done the last cluster. Then to complete the row, I'm going to chain 2, then slip stitch onto the chain 2 at the beginning. That's the end of row 1. Then we're going to chain 2 and turn to begin row 2. We begin into this gap, place 2 double crochets there. So that together with the chain, that is 3 double crochets. Then chain 2, go back into that gap and place 3 more double crochets. Chain 1, skip over to the next gap and place 3 double crochets into that gap. But then we're not going to do the shell there, we're only placing 3 double crochets. Then chain 1 into the next gap, we're going to place the shell, 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets. So chain 2 and another 3 double crochets into the same gap. So we have a shell, 3 double crochets, another shell, 3 double crochets, then another shell. So we alternate into the next gap, we chain 1, then work 3 double crochets only. Chain 1, the next one gets a shell, chain 1, and the next one will get just 3 double crochets. Then we're going to chain 1 and slip stitch onto the chain 2 to complete row 2. And that means we're going to have 3 corners. So we have this one, and this other one. So we're only going to place the shells onto the corners. Only all the other gaps will get just 3 double crochets. So right now, chain 2 and turn, begin in this gap, and that gap gets 2 double crochets. So together with the chain, we get 3. Chain 1, the next one gets only 3 double crochets. The next one is a corner, and therefore that gets a shell. So chain 1 and place 3 double crochets. Chain 2 and 3 more double crochets right there. Then chain 1, skip over to the next gap with 3 double crochets. Chain 1, 3 double crochets next. Chain 1, this is a corner, so that gets a shell. Then the next two will only get 2 double crochets, 3 double crochets each. So chain 1, slip stitch at the end, then chain 1, and the triangle is ready. I'll just grab the yarn and start with a slip knot. Then grab one of the squares from the right side of the square. In one of the corners, I'll reconnect the yarn there with a slip stitch, just like that. Then chain 2, and the chain 2 is our first double crochet. Go back into that gap with 2 double crochets. Because it's a corner, we're going to place a shell, so chain 2, go back into the gap with 3 double crochets. Chain 1, then we place 3 double crochets in 1, 2, and 3, a shell, and go all the way around. So at the end I'll chain 1 and slip stitch onto the chain 2 to complete the round, then chain 1 and cut off the yarn. At this point you need to know the length of your square, so I'll get the measuring tape and measure. So without stretching from one corner to the next one, I have 5 inches. Then when I give this a bit of a stretch, it goes to around 7 inches, and you can stretch a bit more. So 7, and I'm working a hip measurement of 43. If I take 6 pieces, it will be 7 times 6, which will give me 42, which will be able to stretch a little bit to get to 43. So I'm going to connect a total of 6 squares. If say your hip measurement is say 35, you're going to connect 5. If it's between 35 to 42, then you can work with 6. If it is between 44 to say 50, you can work with 7. So depending on the size of the length of your square, you're going to determine the number of squares that you're going to join in order to get to your hip measurement. So we're going to work the next square differently. So grab the square. Do not work it the same way we've worked the previous one, although we are starting the same way. So what we do is begin by the slip knot, get the corner, one of the corners, and reconnect the yarn right there. Then chain 2, go back into that gap with 2 double crochets, 1 and 2 to make 3. Then you're going to chain 1 instead of 2. Then you're going to grab the first square that you worked and hold it like this. Then I'm going to go into the corner, insert my hook like this, and do a slip stitch there. And the slip stitch acts as our second chain. Then we're going to go yarn over and go back into this gap and place 3 more double crochets. But then you want to make sure that your work is not too stretched out. So make sure that the stitches are tight enough. Work the 3 double crochets. Then turn your work like this. And then insert your hook into the second gap right here. Like this. Then grab a loop to complete a slip stitch. And that will act as our chain 1 that we've been working in between the stitches. Then we're going to go to this square and place 3 double crochets into this next gap. So 1, 2. This is after the 3 double crochets. Then we go into the next gap, insert the hook like this, then complete a slip stitch there. Then we go into the next gap on this square and do 3 double crochets. That takes us into the next gap of the first square. Insert the hook into that square and grab a loop to do a slip stitch. Then move on to the next gap and place 3 double crochets. Then into the next gap on the other square, we do a slip stitch. Then turn over to this square and do 3 double crochets into the corner gap. So 3, then chain 1. Now go into the corner gap of the other square and slip stitch. Then we go back into that corner gap and place 3 more double crochets. Our 2 squares are joined. Now we just continue working all the way around the square now, same way we did with the other square. So now begin by chaining 1, go into the next gap and place only 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets next, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next gap, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the corner gap. So we are placing a shell there, so 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 more double crochets there, at the end chain 1 and slip stitch onto the chain 2 at the beginning, then chain 1 and cut off the yarn, pull through and fasten, and we have our first 2 squares joined. So I just like to pull the squares to keep them in shape. That's what we have now. We're going to grab another square and connect it the same way we've connected the second one. So begin with a slip knot. and slip stitch onto the chain 2, chain 1, and cut off the yarn, pull through and fasten. Now the third square is joined, and this is what we have so far. Now I'll just measure this. One of my squares was 7, so this gets me to 16 without stretching, and when I stretch it should get me to 21, because 7 times 3 is 21. And right there we are at 21. So now I'm going to connect 3 more squares, and then once I get the 3 more squares, I'll have gotten to my hip measurement, and I'll come back and show you what to do next. I'll be back before I complete the 6th square, because we're going to do something different at the end. This is after joining 6 granny squares, but then I've not completed the 6th one. So we're going to connect the 6th to the 1st. So what you do is fold the work into 2 like this. I'm at the corner, so I already joined at this point, then work until the next corner. Once I get to the next corner, I'll only do 3 double crochets, and then after that I'll chain 1, then grab the corner of the first square like this and slip stitch into that corner, then go back right here and place 3 double crochets. Then I'll go into the next gap and slip stitch, go into the 6th square and into the next gap, place 3 double crochets, then slip stitch onto the next gap of the first square, go back into the 6th and place 3 double crochets into the next gap, then continue till I get to the corner, in the corner place 3 double crochets, chain 1, go into the corner of the other square and do a slip stitch, then back into this corner with 3 double crochets, chain 1 and cut off the yarn. At that point, pull through and fasten. So we have our complete round, and we can measure this. It's divided into 2, and from one end to another without stretching it goes to 16, and this means this skirt can fit somebody with a hip measurement of between 32, and then when you stretch it's getting up to 22, which is 44. So between 32 and 44, but for a 32 it will be too loose. So I would advise, if you're between 35 and 44, then the 6 squares will be enough for the hip measurement. So now we're going to work the length. To increase the length, I'm going to connect 1 row of 6 squares. So I'll begin with the first one, reconnect it to one of the corners. So I'll get my next square and begin the same way we've been beginning. So reconnect the yarn with a slip stitch in one of the corners, chain 2, work 2 double crochets right there, then chain 1, grab any point of connection, and then right here we were connecting into the chain 2, but now we're going to connect in this opposite part right here. So right here you're going to put your hook through and do a slip stitch. You can begin at any point of connection, then go back into this with 3 double crochets. So after the 3 double crochets, we go into the next gap like this and slip stitch, then go into this gap with 3 double crochets, then slip stitch right here, 3 double crochets into the next gap, then slip stitch, three double crochets at the corner, chain 1, then into the next point of connection at this point right here, do a slip stitch, then go back into the corner gap and place 3 more double crochets, and we have that square connected. Then now I'm going to work all the way around till I get back to this point. I have that first square connected, so we move on to the next one. Slip knot, grab a square, reconnect the yarn, chain 2, place 2 double crochets, chain 1, then we're going to connect from this corner going this way. So we begin here in that corner stitch, do a slip stitch, then go back right here with 3 double crochets, then into the next gap right here, slip stitch, into the next gap, this one, 3 double crochets, we've gotten to the next corner, and right here we're going to slip stitch from this opposite square. On this opposite square right here, do a slip stitch, then go back right here with 3 double crochets, so we've connected up to this corner. Now we start connecting onto the next square till we get to this other corner right here. At the corner I've done 3 double crochets, then I've chained 1, and then we're going to connect into the next corner right here with a slip stitch. Then go back right here with 3 double crochets and complete the round till you get to the end. I have the second square joint like that, so I'm going to get a third one and connect it right here, then on this edge, same way. Then once I'm done connecting the third, I'll do the 4th and the 5th, then I'll meet you once I'm connecting the 6th one. So this one, we connect it on this edge and on this other edge, get here, then complete the round. I'm joining the last square right now, and I've already joined on this part, then I'm joining on this, and then I'll also join on this the third part. So for the other squares I was only joining on 2 parts, this one and this one, but for the last one we join in 3 parts, so this and this. So I'm just coming to the end of the second part of joining, so I'm just doing the 3 double crochets, slip stitch into the gap that follows, work into this gap, the corner gap, place 3 double crochets, chain 1. We are at the corner, and into this corner you want to slip stitch on this part that is directly opposite. do a slip stitch right there, then work back into the chain 2 at the corner, 3 double crochets, I'm in the last gap, so I'll place the 3 double crochets, chain 1, slip stitch on the corner gap of the other side, then 3 double crochets into that chain 2 gap, that same gap at the corner, chain 1, and continue to the end, then slip stitch onto the chain 2 at the end. Chain 1 and cut off the yarn, pull through, fasten. The second row is done. Now you need to determine the length of your skirt. So right now my skirt is at a length of almost 10 inches. So I'm going to do one more row, which will get me to 15, and then I'll do one last row for the waist. The waist part, we're going to work it differently. So let me go on, attach another row right here, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the waist row. Now for the waist row, that is where we're going to use the triangles. This is after the 3 rows, and before I attach the waist part, I'm going to do an edging at the bottom. So after the last connection, I've not cut off the yarn. So what I'll do, I'll just turn my work to this side, insert the hook back in place, then I'll chain 1 at that end, then slip stitch onto the double crochet, slip stitch onto the next double crochet, then slip stitch onto this space. Then we are at the corner and we're going to work a slip stitch at the point of connection right here. Do a slip stitch right there, then chain 2, go back into that gap and place 3 double crochets, after that we're going to skip this part and work into the chain 1 gap right here with a slip stitch, then chain 2, go back into that gap and place 3 double crochets, into the next gap, slip stitch, chain 2, 3 double crochets there, skip over to the next gap, do a slip stitch, chain 2, 3 double crochets, into the next chain 1 gap, slip stitch, chain 2, then place 3 double crochets, we get to a point of connection, and instead of working here, we're going to work at the middle. So slip stitch at this point, chain 2, go back at that point of connection and place 3 double crochets, then we slip stitch into the next chain 1 gap, chain 2, and repeat this to the end. So you're slip stitching into each gap and working 3 double crochets. Once you get to the point of connection, you slip stitch in this gap and keep going all the way around. I'll meet you once I'm done with that bottom edging. To complete the edging, we're going to slip stitch onto the chain 1, the first chain right here. Do a slip stitch, chain 1, and cut off the yarn. Pull through, fasten, and we are done with the bottom part of the skirt. Now what's left to do is the waist part. Now for the waist part, you need to determine the size of your waist. I'm working a waist of 30, and six squares are giving me 42, which means if I use 6 of these, the waist will be too big. So what I do is I'll get 4 squares. Because 1 square is 7 inches, 4 squares will give me 28. Then I'll work with two triangles, and each of these will give me 1 and 1. So I'll have 28 plus 2, which will give me the waist measurement, which is 30. So what I'll do is I'll begin with one of the triangles. Start with a slip knot. Get one corner of the triangle and reconnect the yarn there. Chain 2, place 2 double crochets into that corner. Then we're going to work from the bottom part. This is the upper part of the skirt. This is the bottom, the part with the edging. So I'm going to work on the upper part, and I'll grab one of the corners right here and do a slip stitch like we've been doing. So I'm going to do the slip stitch into this gap. Slip stitch, then go back into this gap and place 3 double crochets. Then that will take us to the next gap of the square, this one right here, and right there we're going to do a slip stitch. We move on to the next gap and do 3 double crochets. Slip stitch onto the next gap of the square. Move on to the next gap of the triangle and place 3 double crochets. Then slip stitch onto the square and continue to the corner. I'm at the corner of the triangle now, and right there I'll place 3 double crochets chain 1, we get to the gap, the next gap on the squares, and slip stitch right here. Then go back into the triangle gap and place 3 double crochets into that corner. So we have the triangle attached like that. Then we're going to go all the way around. Wherever there is a corner right here, that's where we place the shell. The other parts only get 3 double crochets. Then cut off there, pull through and fasten. And that's what we have after attaching that. I'll just turn it to the wrong side like this. And next we're going to attach squares. So at this point we'll attach a square and another square, 2 squares following each other. So we begin with this one, slip knot, reconnect the yarn, chain 2, place 2 double crochets there, slip stitch on this part of the triangle, then do 3 double crochets back into the square, then we're going to move to the next gap of the triangle and slip stitch into the next gap of the square, do 3 double crochets, three double crochets at the corner, chain 1, attach at the corner of the squares, with a slip stitch, then continue attaching the square, this square with the other square till you get to the corner. Now we go back to the square and place 3 double crochets, I'll continue now to the end because the square is now attached as it should. Then continue all the way to the end. Then I'll go ahead and attach another square right here. Then I'll come back once the two squares are in place. Once you connect the last square, do not cut off the yarn. So let me show you what we have right now. So this is the waist part of the skirt, and this is the bottom part. Now we're going to do one last row on the top part, and we're going to do it with single crochets. So what we do is go back to where you've just ended, chain one. We're going to work in between the stitches. So in between these two double crochets, do a single crochet. As I do that, I'll work over the ends that I can. Next, I'll work in between the next two double crochets right here, single crochet, into the chain, single crochet, into this gap, single crochet right here, then in between these two double crochets, place a single crochet in between. So basically each of the stitches is just getting one single crochet, and we'll do that till we get back to where we've started. I'm back where I started, and I'll just do a slip stitch onto the first single crochet, chain one, and cut off the yarn. And at this point we're done with the skirt. All that's left to do is weave in all the ends. I'll be doing that on the inside, and I'll do that off camera. So the waist part and the skirts all the way down. So thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the tutorial. If you've enjoyed the tutorial, kindly leave a like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, comment on the video. If you get to recreate this, kindly tag me on my social media pages, that is on Instagram and on TikTok. I'll be leaving the links on the description box. If you'd like to place an order, you can do that on my Instagram page. If you want to leave a special gift, click on the thanks button and leave a gift of any size. I'll appreciate it. See you in the next tutorial.